Hello and welcome back to the Lore Raider. You know what I haven't made in a while? A ranking video. You know what's a staple in every Metroid game? Boss fights, of course. Today we'll be ranking the first boss fight of every 2D Metroid game. Also, to be clear, I do mean the first true boss, not the first mini-boss. As such, the likes of the first central unit from Metroid Dread and Ceres Space Colony Ridley won't be on this list. Before we begin, I'd like to once again remind you all that we have a Discord server, one I run with my good buddy Zeratone. So if you're interested in lore of Metroid, Dark Souls, or otherwise, please feel free to join. Finally, be sure to like, share, and subscribe for more content like this. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the rankings. Arachnus from Metroid 2 Return of Samus is the only boss that could have been at the bottom of the list, and frankly is barely worthy being called a boss. He's encountered relatively early into the game, and he pretends to be an item ball before springing up to attack you. He seems indestructible at first, but upon realizing he is weak to bombs, he is easily dispatched. The only thing that's really half decent about this boss is that he sets up the idea of using bombs as a weapon against the end of the game boss, the Queen Metroid. F-tier boss, otherwise. So this is where the bosses actually get decent. Spore Spawn is the first real boss of Super Metroid, and the barrier between escaping Green Brinstar and progressing with the rest of the game. Spore Spawn stands in stark contrast from most bosses in the game, being slow and taking his time. He doesn't attack aside from moving from side to side and spores constantly falling down, which can be beaten simply by hugging the left ledge corner. His actual purpose in the game, however, is to teach the player that bosses are not always horrible and have weak spots, that being the mouth, and in my opinion, his movements do set up the Phantoon boss much later in the game. A detail I particularly like about Spore Spawn is that as he weakens, he moves faster and faster, as if becoming desperate to stay alive. Overall, a mid-tier boss. Let's move on. Now, I know this might be a hot take, but hear me out. Kraid is the only boss in NES Metroid that's actually fair and enjoyable. Ridley can literally be done damageless with no effort, and Mother Brain is hell in a bad way. Kraid, however, is an actually stressful experience that offers a fair challenge, as the player is either trying to ram him and bomb him, or hit him with missiles, but either way, it's ultimately the player is trying to attrition him out before he wears down your meager health bar. He isn't complicated, and he is obviously a messy fight given the game's outdated controls, but he is undoubtedly the most enjoyable boss in the game, and the ability to tackle him in a variety of different ways is actually a thing not a ton of bosses in Metroid allow for, making him fairly unique in that way. If this was AM2R, the Arachnus boss would be higher, but sadly we are stuck with the inferior but still good Samus Returns Arachnus as the game's first real boss. He's a skill check in learning to read attacks and dodge long-range attacks, as well as being quick on the draw when using your bombs, something that becomes key as the game moves ahead. His boss theme is really good, as it separates itself from Arachnus X's theme, so it stands out really well. But what he really is this high for is that he's the first boss on the list to be both fast-paced, unlike Spore Spawn, but also not be hampered by janky controls like NES Troid Kraid. A good boss fight, but let's move on. Cracking the top 3 of our list is none other than Kraid from Metroid Zero Mission. Now this guy is a boss. His introduction presents him as this larger-than-life figure towering over Samus, and Kraid is a dynamic boss as the rules of the fight change as it progresses. As you damage him, he slowly destroys the stone platforms that you rely on, forcing you to use his belly claws if you fall down. And the claustrophobic nature of the arena means that you have less time to react to his thrown fingernails. He's a surprisingly stressful encounter for perhaps the easiest Metroid game ever made. Kraid is just a well-designed boss in general. Love him, he deserves the top 3. Getting our silver medal is Arachnus X, and this boss does not get the praise it deserves. Arachnus X is only the first boss of the game, and is literally capable of destroying you if you aren't careful. The fight takes place in this claustrophobic space, and if you don't read the attacks correctly, you can easily take stupid damage in a fight where you don't have much health to spare. And even when you think this monster is dead, it makes a last stand by turning into Core X, forcing you to kite the enemy around this cramped space, hoping it doesn't shred your meager defenses. Not to mention, this boss theme is really cool at that and really complements the boss. It makes it even more memorable. It was obvious that it would have a high place in this ranking, and I was tempted to make it number 1, but...
Number 1!
To no one's real surprise, Corpius is the obvious pick for the number 1 spot, and really, Metroid Dread really just did blow it out of the park for 2D boss fights. Firstly, it is the only boss here on the list with actual build-up, as you can actually see the invisible Corpius slinking around the level of Artaria as you progress. Then, when it confronts you, it attempts to lunge at you in a cutscene, and Samus slides under it, subtly telling you key information when dealing with the monster. Corpius is just plain fun. It is designed to teach players how to read attacks in this game, whilst also being incredibly fair, with very few attacks that are, again, very well telegraphed. It also allows you to play this boss in a number of ways, as when it turns invisible, you can indeed go for its tail light, but you can also attempt to still shoot at its face and ignore the tail altogether. Finally, between the boss theme, which befits such a slimy and disgusting creature, and the final cutscene where Samus coldly executes the creature while styling on it, for absolutely no reason by the way, Corpius just absolutely deserves the top spot for first boss fights in Metroid.